Welcome to the Horace Mann League's podcast series. This program is dedicated to superintendents, professors of education, association leaders, and others who believe the common public school is the cornerstone of our community and our democracy. My name is Jean Collins DeWeese, Executive Director of the Horace Mann League. With me today is your host, Jimmy Minichello.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the Horace Mann League podcast series. He's a senior fellow and thought leader at the Successful Practices Network and the National Dropout Prevention Center, previously serving as their president. Prior to that, he was the dean for the School of Education at Southern New Hampshire University, which Fast Company magazine named the 12th most innovative organization in the world among its 50 most innovative companies. He also served as president of the International Center for Leadership in Education and was also chief learning officer for Penn Foster, a global leader in online education. In 2000, he was named Vermont Superintendent of the Year. A very good friend of mine and a good friend of public education, let me welcome Mr. Ray McNulty to the program. Ray, it's great to be with you, my friend.
Hey, Jimmy, it's great to be with you, and you always inspire me. You've got that great character and ask wonderful questions. Always admire your work.
Well, we hope to do so today. Thank you for the kind words.
That's great. That's great.
Well, our theme for this episode, AI, artificial intelligence, which has, as you know, has exploded in the past year in how we live our lives and how we do our jobs. But before we get there, talk a little bit about what you've been up to.
Well, one of the things I've been up to is I've decided to really, as I've been maturing in my positions in education over the years, I've really turned to a focus over these next 4 or 5 years. And the focus is really about the future of education. We in education need to spend more time focused on the future than on the past. What I've been finding, quite frankly, is that schools like to adapt to things. They like to have a change happen and then they adapt. And what I believe we need to do in this world is that we need to have school districts anticipating and preparing for the future. So when the future arrives, they're already aligned to it. I've stepped away from running organizations and have been focusing all of my attention and time on what does the future of education look like? How do I work with school districts that really want to become innovative and creative and be the leaders? And so that's what I'm spending my time on. So this topic just falls right into my lap.
The school system leaders you're talking to, are they aligned with that future-driven feeling that you just shared?
Yeah, most of the districts I work with now have reached out. They want to be the lighthouses. They want to be the trendsetters in education because, the world we live in right now is called a VUCA world. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in a world like that, you can't be an organization and survive if you sit back and wait for things to happen. You have to be engaged in this work. There are lots of districts and many districts from, low-income communities to high-income communities, you name it, that just feel like we've got to get our kids ready to live and learn and be successful in the future they will live in, not the past. And the world is very different, and we need to start looking at that.
I'm so glad, Ray, you brought up the VUCA world because I would like to remind our listeners, you wrote a spectacular article in an issue of School Administrator, AASA's monthly magazine, all about that. And the link to that article will be in the show notes. So I wanted to remind our listeners about that.
Thanks. That's great.
So let's talk a little bit about AI. Mm-hmm. How do you see it impacting our classrooms, our school buildings, as we mentioned before, the school system leaders you're speaking with, and people you come in contact with every day?
It's all encompassing at this point in time. I'd love to say we've got our hand on it and it's working well. But here's the thing. What's it impacting in our systems? It's really giving a better life to the concept of personalized learning. It's a tool that I can see districts engaging with teachers, engaging to clearly more personalized learning for our students. I see it also as a support to teachers and their productivity. It's allowing our educators to use it to help with grading and planning lessons and attendance, and it's enhancing a lot of the materials and the work that our teachers are doing. But what I want to say at the same time is that AI is a wonderful thing, but it has to merge with HI, human intelligence, and that AI and HI work hand in hand. And it's not, one of the things we know about AI that we see is that it's just like a human brain. It makes errors as well as humans do. We need educators to continue to monitor and guide and pay attention, but this tool can be a great tool for them to help speed up the amount of things that they're doing. I see it happening in many schools, particularly with working with students that are having writing samples that are done, and teachers having to, if you think about a high school English teacher with 120, 130 kids and their 100 papers at night and all that, to be able to help them deliver back to the students very quickly their work. So there's a lot of things where AI will be having a significant impact, and it's also at the same time, it'll have positive impacts and negative impacts. And sometimes, what I see in the field is everyone thinks that all these ideas that come up are going to be perfect. I don't believe there's anything that we've ever launched in education, or even anybody that's building a product, that everything is perfect. There are positives and negatives to everything that we see out there in the field. But clearly, I think this is going to be a big help for educators with the idea of personalizing learning and teacher support for their productivity and their productivity in what they do, designing and enhancing all the materials that we use.
To get back to what you said earlier, make sure you fact check anything you receive. If you hand in a paper or an assignment or something, if it involves facts and figures, double check the facts that they're correct.
Absolutely, because AI is using the internet as its internal brain. Things are getting better, I'll say that. But what's happening is it's going out there and it's finding things and it's following directions that you give it in your prompt. It has has moments of hallucination where it might grab something that's totally incorrect and include it in there. And again, not like a human would do as well. But we have to remember that there's a balance here, and we have to pay attention to it.
And what about those who may be intimidated by it? What would you say to them?
The first thing I'd say to them is play with it. I've been working with groups of teachers. A lot of them are very shy about admitting that they use it. And so I generally will ask a question, and somebody said, well, I'm using it to have it take a picture of my refrigerator, inside my refrigerator. And I ask it to make a menu for the items that I have available. And it goes about and makes a menu. And so they're starting to use it on their own little things that they're doing, and then they're slowly getting in. And I'd ask every educator out there who's intimidated by it, it's getting easier and easier to use. Very much like the internet when we first experienced it. You'll remember going online and it being, taking a long time, and all those connections with your phone and that weird noise and the disruption. That's gotten better. AI is getting better. Now you can talk to it and it will talk back to you. But what the issue is, if you're intimidated by it, is begin to think about things that you personally might want to have experience with AI. I know friends that have put in their budget for a trip, and they've asked AI, we want to go to a warm place. We're going to spend this much money. Give me some ideas.
So use it for practical purposes as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. Practical purposes are a good way to begin this thing. If you're going on a trip to, I'm going to say Ireland, go into AI and ask it a bunch of questions, and then keep talking with it. And you're going to see that it gets better over time. It might give you some great ideas. I had a friend that was just coming to visit us here on the Cape, and they were going to spend a few days in Boston. He said, we'd like to do a couple of things in Boston. And I just went online to chat and just said, this person's 60 years old, a Yankees fan, and all this. I put down things I know about them. They come into Boston to visit. What would you recommend? It pumped out like 10 different things that they could do.
Well, kudos to your friend who's the Yankee fan. I will tell you that right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of places you don't want to go in Boston. Yeah, anyway.
It's so funny, Ray, you mentioned going on a trip. A friend of mine, and true story.
Yep.
A friend of mine, I was speaking with her the day before yesterday. She's going to London for over the holidays. She asked me to ask AI, what are some recommendations to go for afternoon tea? I asked the question, and within a second and a half, 2 seconds at the most, 8 or 9 places. It gave the name of the place, a description, its address, what it's known for, etc.
That's great. And the thing that is important about this, and for all those educators that are listening that are a little fearful of it, then once it gives you information, you can go back to it and say, okay, out of these 6 or out of these 8, my budget's $50 and I'm going to be at this location. So what would be the most convenient for me? You can just go back, and it will continue to go back and forth with you.
Yes. As a matter of fact, again, as if on cue, I went back, and because she asked me about safety regarding the places where you meaning the AI just mentioned, what about safety recommendations? And out came some recommendations on safety.
Right. Jimmy, I think that when educators start playing with it for personal reasons, and then they start to recognize, oh, let me now throw in a lesson that I've always taught, and let me ask it some questions about the lesson and how to make it more designed better for a 10-year-old or whatever. And they'll start to do it. Once they start doing it, I'm going to tell you, it becomes very addicting. Again, we have to balance AI and HI, and we have to make sure that we're reviewing everything.
So you mentioned earlier you're working with teachers on how to craft lessons, instruction, etc. What strategies would you recommend to them who may feel overwhelmed by the process of integrating AI into their classrooms?
One of the things I think is that, again, it would depend on the classroom, but if it's upper elementary, middle, and high school students, that one of the things you should do is get into a conversation with the students about AI. Kids are already playing with AI all over the place, and we know this. And so having a conversation with them about using it and asking them for advice, how might I use this, to begin to realize and show this is something new that we're all engaging with. You see, the thing is that we spend so much time in education perfecting the past, the way we've always done things. And as we start to lean into these new initiatives that are coming, what we need to understand is that our kids are probably playing with it, and we should engage in some conversations with them. The other thing is that I think educators in general should, from a faculty level, is there are those educators that are probably using it that they could be given some time during faculty meetings where they talk about how they're using it in the classroom. They share it with their fellow teachers, and then begins a dialogue, because this is happening so quickly, and our systems are not designed to respond very quickly. But we need to understand that this is happening everywhere. And if we think about the aim of education, which our aim of education really is not to have our kids do well in school, it's to have them do well in the lives they lead outside of school in the real world. So the more our school becomes more like the real world, the more effective it's going to be in getting our kids ready to live in the future. And so when we don't know something, or we're nervous about using something, share it with our students. Have a conversation. Bring a group of students together, maybe after school. Call 5 or 6 students to hang out and give you some ideas, and let's put a lesson together. Let's see how we can do this. How can we make this better for us in our classroom? How can we make this more relevant to what's going on in the world? Having some of those questions, I think, are really helpful, and they build a sense of trust. Because I really believe that you can only adopt new things, and I want to say it this way, at the speed of trust. And so where I see teachers that are being successful with this work is I've seen some English language arts teachers that will write on the student's paper, this was an AI-assisted correction of your paper. When they use AI, they make a note on the paper. This was AI-assisted. And then the teacher will say to the students, and I want you, when you do a paper, I want you to write that it was AI-assisted. And that way we all know it's okay to use it if you openly talk about it and share it with me. So
Yes.
I think that's the kind of trust we have to engage in this mega shift that's going on in the world of AI. Because AI is not just in our schools, it's everywhere. We're going to have to understand that it's going to be there. How do we engage with it? How do we use it appropriately? So many challenges and yet so many opportunities.
Well, speaking of trust, what
Yeah.
are some ethical concerns that you might be hearing
Yeah.
about, and how some districts navigate the ethical concerns related to AI usage?
There are several ethical concerns. And one is that when you're using AI, you have to remember that the AI is using the internet as its neurons, as its brain. And there are a lot of biases present in the internet and out there. There are all kinds of blogs and postings that are going to, if AI grabs a hold of it, it could perpetuate or it could exacerbate inequities, further more inequities in education. So we have to be really careful. We have to ensure fairness and justice in the materials that we're using. We're going to see more improvement in that area in the next few years as educators and systems start to create AI that is shielded from certain items in the internet, and they're starting to develop these systems that will, like in the medical profession, they have some locked down search areas where AI only operates where the material has been reviewed and it's valid. We're going to see some of that. So we have the issues of bias and equity. We have issues of student privacy. There are concerns around privacy when we're having AI analyze personal work of a student. When having AI analyze data in a system, we have to realize that there might be FERPA violations and things like that. So policies and procedures that we have need to be in place to settle some of these ethical concerns that are out there. There's also this, the significant continuing digital divide where some students have things and some students don't. And we have to figure out how unserved areas get the opportunity as well. So the ethical concerns continue to develop. And I think that superintendents now know what we have to do is we have to study what the negative effects of AI will be in our system and the positive effects. What are the positive effects? And I do some training on that in districts because I use something called the futures wheel, and we analyze an implementation in a certain way. And what we want to do is we want to find out what are the really positive things of AI, what are the negative things. How do we build a policy and a procedure that accelerates the positive outcomes of AI and suppresses the negative results? That's where it's important, as we think ahead of when we start to develop a policy or a procedure, we have to figure out what are the things we want to make sure it enhances and what are the things that we want to make sure that it kind of pushes aside and makes it less likely that those issues will arise in our system.
And are you finding, Ray, that the positives and enhancements are tipping the scale compared to the negatives?
I believe so. I'm seeing students are beginning to understand this. And there's nothing more powerful when you see a student using AI and engaging in some practices and learnings that they get so excited about. They want to continue to learn deeply these things. The ability to personalize learning has a substantial positive effect on our kids and their future if we can get them to feel like they're learners. One of the things in education, we're so content focused and our content's very specific. But what we really want to do is capture the creativity and innovative mindset of our students. A lot of them have different, they have ideas of things. And maybe when you were in school, because I know you and you're very interested in photography and broadcasting and all of that. And there's not a lot of content about that in a school. If you were to take, and in a school where they might have special projects being done and having students go very deep in those areas that they really love, that's an empowering experience where students start to realize they're learning on their own and they're learning stuff that they love And that creates the kind of learner we want for the 21st century.
So the need to, as you indicated earlier, about building that culture among superintendents, principals, lead teachers, students, bus drivers, custodians, in fact, anybody associated with a school should be there.
Yeah. I think it's some excitement because, we have to remember, and this is something that out in the field right now, sometimes I get a thumbs up and sometimes I get a thumb down on it, but we call all of our professionals that are in the classrooms teachers. There's this point about teaching, and that's an important aspect, but our schools are really about learning. And I think the teachers are learning engineers. They're people that engineer an experience where the students learn and they learn on their own. Because we don't want to develop dependent learners. We want to develop independent learners. And so there's this handoff of being a teacher and teaching content and then slowly being able to transition it where the student has become the learner. That's what we need in the future. Now, there's more ways for us with the idea of personalizing learning, of getting all of our kids to feel that they're the learner. They love learning things. They're excited about it. And I think AI offers us some opportunities like that.
So how can educators and administrators and, again, everyone associated with a school work together to create effective usage policies?
We have to have, I'm going to say, the right set of questions to start to ask about this work, right? So like as a superintendent or a leader, what are the district's goals and long-term vision? Does AI align with that? What are the outcomes that we want for our students? Does AI have an opportunity to help us in that area? If you think about the future of education and the policies, we want policies that keep us in a certain area, but don't prevent us from having our students be able to be ready to live in the future in the future that's out there. Educators need to think about a balance of policy and procedure. Like as a former superintendent and commissioner, when you say policy, it's kind of like board policy, state policy. It puts guardrails out there. Then we need procedures inside our institutions that will allow us to be more innovative and creative, because that's what the world is saying they need. They need students that are not just have content knowledge, but they're eager to learn new and interesting things. And they're people that can anticipate the future, that they're resilient when they meet tough things. Those kind of things are managed, I think, inside, in my opinion, inside a school, where a school, we have policies for everything, but I don't see us having procedures in our schools to innovate and create new things. We need to have internally maybe a group of people that serve as an innovation committee, where they're constantly saying, how do we improve what we're doing? How do we bring new ideas in? Teachers have a new idea. The concept is, if they've got something that they believe is really going to be impactful and their kids are excited about it, how do we make that happen in a school? I got this expression that I've been using lately, and I do it because generally when I'm talking to somebody or doing a speech, I've got limited time. But when you walk into the registry of motor vehicles in every one of the states, it's a place that has routine and procedures that monitor everything that goes on. Yes. It doesn't feel the same as walking into a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon or a new startup, where people are wanting its employees to generate new ideas and interesting concepts. That's what has to happen in public schools. In order for AI to really be an engaging tool, we need to be able to be ready to move with ideas that are coming in. So might have a board member and a teacher and a couple of parents and some students, and people pitch their ideas. How do we bring these new ideas in? AI is a massive disruptor. I mean, it's changing so much, not just in education, but everywhere. And the question is, how do we figure out what the positive impacts are, and how do we lessen the negative impact? In order for us to do that, we got to play with it. We got to try it. We got to use it. I see it happening a lot. I see it in the area. And I think you and I had a conversation about this. You use Grammarly. I use Grammarly. I serve on a board over in England, where in England they did a study of getting students to use Grammarly on their own. And what they learned was the instant error correction and ideas that it was giving them. They started to learn grammar quicker than they did in class, because it's instant error correction. It's not a red pen or anything. It's just giving the writer ideas. And so when we see tools like that, we want to put them in front of students because it's a self-learning model. And I think it's very important as we think about a rapidly changing world. Schools don't change very quickly. So how do we create a culture inside our school that allows our school to manage and create trust amongst their faculty, their students, and the leadership in the school, where they have a culture of like Google, where they have, at Google, they have a 20% rule. 20% of your time is to be spent on thinking about new ideas, new ways of doing things. When I was at SNHU, we were always challenged at SNHU as a dean to, how can you be more creative? How can, let's think about what things we've been doing and what are the things we should stop doing, what are the things we should start doing. And so I really believe in the very end of all of this is we have to balance two things. We have to balance the past, and we should bring some of the past with us. We have to take in the future. Educators in schools, we've got to be able to balance that much better than we have in the past. I think we spent way too much time on trying to perfect the past rather than create the future.
Ray, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I could not thank you enough. But before we say goodbye, anything you'd like to add?
One of the things I think I'd love to add to all of you that are listening is to recognize that we shouldn't be afraid of new things. We should be trying things out. And I lean on my grandchildren, and I lean on, when I go into a school, I usually try to find some students to talk to and ask them, what are they excited about? And because, I grew up in public education when we had to put paper bag book covers over our books. I'm like, why are we doing that? I showed a bunch of teachers a picture of a book cover with a paper bag. They started laughing, But you see, the thing is, in those days, curriculum lasted 10 years, 15 years. You buy a set of books, they were with you for a long time. Nowadays, it's information travels so quickly. Things change quickly. We have a different culture we need to design in our schools. And I think we do that by listening to our students, looking at what's going on outside. I think we need to be curious, but we also need to be cautious as we go ahead. And I think that's the excitement of a really great school, when you see them trying things. And by the way, increasing the amount of failure. Failure is part of learning. We're going to launch something with AI. There might be something wrong with it. Don't throw everything out. Figure out, how do you lessen that negative impact? How do you elevate that more positive impact?
Well, Ray, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Jimmy, and I appreciate the work that you do. Hope we can see each other together again soon.
We'll make that happen.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
A special thanks to the Horace Mann League for hosting our podcast series, but most of all, thank you for listening to the program. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Horace Mann League podcast series. Our members are committed to Mann's ideal that the public school is one of the central unifying influences in American life. All of our podcasts are listed on YouTube, as well as the Horace Mann League website, hmleague.org. We also invite you to join the conversation through social media by accessing #HMannLeague. Once again, thank you for listening.